Welcome to the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub, a series of educational podcasts that showcase the connection between human capabilities and good work design, brought to you by the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia.
Hi everyone, I'm Carlo Caponecchia, an academic at UNSW, and today we're inviting you somewhere a little different. Instead of joining us in a conference room or hearing from human factors practitioners, we're taking you back to the classroom. What you're about to hear is part of a student assessment from my course, Human Factors, Tools and Methods. It's a hands-on workshop course where students get to explore a wide range of human factors and ergonomics methods, from surveys and interviews and verbal protocol analysis through to tools such as the quick exposure check, FRAM, STAMP and AcciMap. For this assessment, students were challenged to do more than simply present their work in class. They had to record a podcast explaining a major incident or safety-related scenario to a lay audience using one of the systems-based human factors tools that we practiced in class. The task wasn't simply to explain what happened. It was to ask the bigger questions. How did the system fail? What decisions, pressures, and organisational influences lined up to create the conditions for the incident? And most importantly, what can we learn? In this episode, the students have examined one of aviation's most significant accidents, American Airlines Flight 191, using Rasmussen's AcciMap framework. Their discussion demonstrates exactly the kind of systems thinking that sits at the heart of human factors. Now, I know most of our Human Factors Ergonomics Society listeners are already familiar with these tools. So this episode probably isn't about learning how to use AcciMap. Instead, it's an opportunity to hear an engaging analysis of an important aviation accident and, perhaps more importantly, to hear from the next generation of human factors practitioners as they develop in their systems thinking. So before we press play, I'd like to welcome the students and thank them for sharing their work. Joining me are Eden, Zeke, Yasmina and Kiralee. Hi everyone, welcome.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
So we might just do a really quick introduction, maybe starting with you first, Eden.
Hello everyone, my name is Eden Kirk. I am a second year student at UNSW. Along with Yasmina and Zeke, but they'll introduce themselves in a bit. I am studying a bachelor degree in aviation management with a graduate diploma in flying. I'm also doing a minor in the management degree called Safety and Human Factors, which gives me deeper insight into the whole world of safety and human factors. Yasmina, Zeke and I have chomped up our minor subjects recently, and instead of spreading out the subjects over the 3-year degree, we've eaten them up and done it within a year and a half, which is quite sad. But it's given us great insight and we all love doing it. So I'll hand over to Zeke next to introduce himself.
Couldn't agree more, Eden, on your points. But my name is Ezekiel Watt. I'm commonly referred to as Zeke. I'm also a second-year student in the aviation management degree with a graduate diploma in flying. A little bit about myself in my background. I came into this degree with basically zero knowledge of what human factors was. And when I enrolled looking at the enrollment of the course, I was like, oh, this is going to be a boring psychic subject that I'm not going to like. But coming here today, I've learned so much and I just love everything about human factors that it has to offer. But I'll pass on to Yasmina to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to the Eden and Zeke for the partial intro on my behalf. I'm also studying the management and graduate diploma degree. We're currently in our second years as well for added context. And we've kind of as well delved really into the human factors side of aviation, which is quite amazing. Speaking on personal experience from my background, I was known to be a child who'd be asking why over and over again, and looking at human factors as an avenue for understanding the how, what, when, and why, especially in regards to accidents and their intricacy, really just, I love this part about studying the degree.
Awesome.
And I'm Kiralee, and I'm a third-year Bachelor of Aviation flying student nearing the end of my flight training. I'm about to finish my instrument rating, and like my peers, I have thoroughly enjoyed the aviation industry my entire life. I was always the child that bullied my sisters for the window when I was flying domestically, and I'm very excited to have the best possible office in the world.
Fantastic. It's great to have you all here, and thank you again for sharing this analysis that you did in class. We'll come back for a few questions and reflections from our students after their in-class podcast. Remember also that this was recorded live in class, which is pretty difficult to do. The students took the task and ran with it, inventing podcast names and highlighting future episodes that they could create. There may even be some jokes at my expense. Students were also able to have a few slides to show on the screen to help with diagrams and to keep their classmates in the room engaged throughout. So, whether you're an experienced practitioner, a student yourself, or simply curious about how we teach elements of human factors today, grab a seat at the back of the classroom and join us for this conversation. Let's listen in.
Create this image in your head for a moment. It's Memorial Day weekend in America and you're on holiday. On a DC-10, a revolutionary plane in the time of 1979. You board a plane at O'Hare International Airport and are excited to find you sitting on the left side of the plane, in the window seat. As American Airlines Flight 191 takes off towards Los Angeles, you're thrilled new technology has advanced so much that a live stream of the takeoff is being broadcasted onto a TV. You have a stellar view out of the window and onto the runway and the engine of the aircraft. As the plane gears up to full throttle, you hurtle down the runway and a humongous bang is accompanied by the left engine flying over the top of the wing. You climb and climb, watching the live stream of doom. It cuts out. Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 79 of EEK, where we talk you through some of the aviation's darkest moments and turn them into lessons that save lives. With us today, we have Eden, Ezekiel, Yasmina, and Kiralee. Please welcome to the mic. So, Kiralee, how did this terrible accident happen?
Well, Eden, it was quite a terrifying situation, really. Upon takeoff, the plane sped up to V1, meaning it had to take off. Just before rotation, the flight deck heard a loud bang from one of the wings and assumed an engine had failed. Little did they know the left engine of the DC-10 fully detached, taking all of the electrics, like the stall warning, with it. The plane continued to climb, however the asymmetric thrust banked the wings, putting the plane into an unrecoverable stall, where it soon crashed at the end of the runway at O'Hare International Airport, leaving no survivors.
Wow, that is really chilling.
Just a quick disclaimer, the purpose of our presentation is to inspire awareness about Flight 191 and the impacts on aviation safety. We'd like to pay our respects to the victims of Flight 191 and their families.
Now, the accident of American Airlines Flight 191 is rather multifaceted in nature, revealing underlying latent failures between a regulator, manufacturer, airline, pilot, and the general public. In an era featuring the crux of airline competition, an organizational drift from safety standards had been prominent in many airlines, with profit becoming the new motto. Yes, engineering marvels were succeeding each other with seconds in between, but this efficiency manifested a fatal gamble with life itself.
Exactly, Yasmina, and Flight 191 shows where the clash between safety and efficiency was most evident. What was thought to be a minor, time-saving maintenance adjustment turned out to be a lesson forever ingrained in the history of aviation.
That's right, Kiralee. Studying reports and recreations of the accident, we've derived a complex web of factors spanning from environmental to individual aspects, which would perfectly be suited to an AcciMap. It is also in the interest of those listening that we truly grasp the gravity of Flight 191's role in aviation safety through this intricate model.
Indeed, this accident serves as a chilling reminder for why we say that the rules of aviation are written in blood.
Now let's set to the scene. It's a dark and stormy night. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's 1997, and Carlo would know this. And this guy, Jens Rasmussen, is investigating accidents in transportation. He's a real nerd, and he starts asking really good questions and making some really good points, including, in spite of all efforts to design safer systems, we still witness severe large-scale accidents. So he asks the question, do we actually have an adequate model of accident causation in the present dynamic society?
Now that's a big question to ask, so what the heck is he actually asking?
Well, up to this point, accidents were investigated with each contributing level of factors considered separately. This included external factors, organizational factors, physical factors, and the outcomes.
So this guy Rasmussen comes along and asks, why are we considering these as separate entities to each other? Should we not connect the dots and see the broader perspective as to why this accident happened?
Seems pretty common sense, right?
Well, this is the idea behind an AcciMap, with arrows or linkages crossing between these levels.
Okay, so what do these arrows mean?
Well, we're relating cause and effect, essentially. Instead of just mentioning the fact that company policy in regards to a certain situation was this, we're now relating this to the staff's decision-making process on that, making sure we understand why each whole eventually led to this accident.
So why do we care about this? Aren't we investigating a plane crash? What does the company policy and management have to do with anything?
Well, this is the answer to why the accident occurred. It is important to bring justice to the victims and their families, so we make sure everything and everyone is held accountable. That is the beauty of an AcciMap.
In the studio, we created an AcciMap of our own so we can visually wrap our heads around it. For those of you at home listening in, we'll paint the picture for you, but check out our link in the description to access our masterpiece.
Let's have a brief look at some of these factors at each level, starting off with the external factors, including governance, regulatory, and manufacturing. Some of these include McDonnell Douglas issuing maintenance recommendation, not mandates, when repairing pylon structures. The lack of enforcement and oversight also from regulatory authorities when airlines deviated from procedures. And finally, the aircraft designers and type certifiers failing to consider any vulnerabilities in the pylon structure if they were ever damaged.
From an organisational perspective, point 1, adoption of time-saving maintenance shortcuts driven by financial and scheduling pressures. 2, unsafe practices became routine over time with limited reporting or challenge from staff. 3, no formal threat or error management or risk assessment for new maintenance procedures. And 4, inadequate training on risks. Maintenance personnel working under fatigue and in circadian load conditions increase the likelihood of human error.
Yes, certainly. This was manifested by performing maintenance on the combined engine and pylon structure, with installation leaving unseen damage to the plane, ultimately causing the left engine to detach, taking the stall warning and electrics with it.
Now all the pieces of the puzzle are fitting in. All the aforementioned factors accumulate to make quite the undesirable recipe, including the aircraft losing its number one engine, creating a loss of control, 273 fatalities, 2 of which were on the ground, and the DC-10 fleet globally being grounded for around 37 days after the accident, with American Airlines losing approximately $200 million.
All right, so now that we've unpacked how all these layers failed, the aircraft, maintenance, and the organisation, the real question is, how do we make sure this type of accident never happens again? Because surely, after what is described as the worst crash in US history, we don't just move on. Something must change, right?
Absolutely. So let's start with the aircraft itself. When that engine tore off the wing, it didn't just peacefully fall, it ripped several critical systems out with it. No redundancies, no protective measures. Moving forward, aircraft design must ensure physical separation or shielding of critical systems so that one failure doesn't trigger a domino effect into a complete loss of control.
Another scary one is the pilots were completely unaware of the stall. Those usual alarms that blare as warning, complete silence. So again, why was there no backup system? I think even conventional backup systems, like those pneumatic ones in small planes, would do. Planes need independent systems that still function, even if one side of the aircraft is destroyed, because clearly in aviation, losing information can be as deadly as losing an engine.
I think what hit me the most is that this accident was so preventable. The DC-10 was not designed with maintenance errors in mind, but should it have been? Absolutely, because humans make mistakes. That is not a possibility, it's a certainty, like paying taxes. So certification processes must include maintenance-induced damage scenarios, not just ideal operating conditions. Imagine if a simple post-maintenance test flight was conducted, possibly hundreds of lives saved.
This leads into mandatory structural inspection, preferably by 2 licensed maintenance engineers verifying the job was done safely. Why were airlines allowed to develop their own maintenance shortcuts in the first place? Moving forward, maintenance must strictly follow manufacturer-approved procedures only. No improvisations, no faster ways. And if you want to change something, it goes through the engineering board.
And organizations don't just fail overnight, they drift. One shortcut becomes normal, then another, until unsafe practices are just how things are done. So we need stronger auditing, random inspections, surveillance, a fear of getting caught to keep us in check. Reading between the lines anytime a company swears on having 100% safety assurance.
I think silence is often the biggest danger, so anonymous reporting is really important too.
So I'd like to bring up the work environment has proper tools, minimal pressure, and independent checks for high-risk tasks.
Would you trust someone to reattach an engine at 3 a.m? Critical maintenance shouldn't be done during circadian low periods. Fatigue must be managed through proper rostering and rest, and scheduling pressure should never overrule safety.
At the end of the day, this wasn't just one failure, it was a chain. Small decisions, small shortcuts, all lining up at the worst possible moment. And that's the key takeaway. Accidents like this aren't random. They're built over time. And if we can understand that, we can start breaking the chain long before it ever gets this far again.
Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. Listen in next week as we discuss the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370.
You are listening to the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society podcast. If this podcast sparks your interest in human factors and ergonomics, why not join us? You can find out more by searching for us at ergonomics.org.au, where you can join the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia, who offers unique insights through our conferences, professional networking and events in this growing scientific field.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, for sharing that analysis with us. I liked all of the podcasts in the class, and I liked yours in particular. What I really liked was how you kind of humanized the theory. Theories and models are just built by regular people, and I think you kind of showed that you were treating it in that way, which I really enjoyed. So I have a few questions for you, and you might have some questions for me, and we'll have a bit of a discussion about it. Firstly, I want to ask you, before you started this project for this assignment, what did you know about Flight 191, and what surprised you the most as you dug into the investigation?
Well, Carlo, you could say that this project from the very beginning was made with love, so to speak. From my personal experience of watching accident videos even before starting this university degree, this accident in particular stood out to me. Not the fact that just because it was a, significant accident in the history of American aviation in particular, but just the way that these little things led up to such a big accident occurring and a lot of loss happening, unfortunately, in that instance. And while we were planning for this project, I was discussing with the team, and we all sort of gravitated towards this accident because it really provided an interesting prospect for human factors analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Yasmina really sales pitched us all into this Flight 191. And I think what was interesting about it is I'd heard bits and pieces of speculation about the DC-10s and the accident itself, but to actually sit down together as a group and watch what happened and actually start our idea generation for this podcast, it really gravitated towards us, as Yasmina said, it gravitated us all in and made us really engage with what we were doing.
The whole project really made you think about things from a systems point of view. Was that a different way of thinking about incidents and accidents than what you were used to before?
Yes, I would absolutely say so. Within our human factors minor subjects we've been doing, it focuses a lot on the human and their schema in particular. So coming into this subject, I personally had quite why did this accident happen? And then go into the mind of the human and try and reason it back that way, which I'm sure absolutely happens in the accidents. But what I hadn't grasped was how there's such a large organizational and external focus and influence that leads to accidents happening, sadly. So, yeah, this was a very good subject to get my mind around there being other factors instead of just the human involved, to being, big organisations and even the government.
Something I found really important was I find frequently that the media is quick to jump to a conclusion, very quick to jump to putting the blame onto pilots or onto the people that are associated with an accident. So I think with an AcciMap, what helped this investigation was to break the accident down into small pieces, into each element, to hopefully not miss a factor that contributed to the accident. So by taking a step back and zooming out of the accident, we were able to use this human factors tool to find every single small piece that you wouldn't even think of normally that have led to this accident sliding through to the death of 270 people. And I think without this human factors tool, we would have missed some aspects, we would have missed some elements that, again, the population wouldn't even think of. That the media, again, is quite quick to jump to fault of pilots. And it's important that we're able to see each aspect as a whole.
And to add on to that, Kiralee, at the time and even nowadays, when we look at an accident, the mass public resorts to a lot of hysteria, and not just about the pilot error, about even the mechanical fault of the aircraft itself. And we can imagine back in the day, in the 70s, the DC-10, and some of you might know this, it was an infamous aircraft. People even refer to it as the death chamber. And this kind of hysteria surrounding the aircraft would have substantially influenced the interpretation of the accident and properly actually dissecting it and seeing what it really was that led to it. So, looking into human factors perspective allows us to set aside those biases and really see it for the facts.
And wasn't it also fascinating how there was a grounding after this accident?
Yeah, there was a grounding for about 30-something days after that, and the public actually ended up regaining trust in the aircraft only after 3 years of its grounding.
And that's not uncommon. I mean, that's happened since then as well with other aircraft types as well, right?
Yeah, the Boeing 737 MAX.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we're seeing recent certifications like the 777 MAX is still under certification.
So we've been talking about AcciMap, and that's Rasmussen's AcciMap is what you all use to analyse this. I wonder if you can just give us a really sort of high-level recap for some of us who've heard of AcciMap but might not be fully across it. How does it work again?
Well, from my understanding, we use the one with 4 levels. And so we focused on the outcomes at the beginning. So we dissected what actually happened, and then we took it a step further, kind of like a wedding cake. We went to the next tier. And the next tier are physical factors. So that for this specific accident flight, AA191, we found there were 3 main ones that we focused on. But then beyond that, I might need a bit of aviation technical terms here, Kiralee. So what actually happened?
So what we found initially was that the left engine has fallen off the wing, and after rotation, the plane has experienced asymmetric thrust. So the engine that is still attached to the aircraft is still producing power, and because there's no longer an engine on the left side, it is rolling and yawing uncontrollably and banking towards the ground. So it's creating a very unstable approach that the pilots were unable to recover from.
So those were the outcomes.
Correct.
Yes.
Bottom level of the AcciMap.
Correct.
Yeah.
Cool. And then you step 1 level up from there.
We got the physical factors. So that was something like unseen damage, forklift operation. And, we covered this as well a few minutes ago in our podcast that we did for the assessment. But beyond that, the next level of the wedding cake, we went to the organisational factors. So how there are different pressures that organisations put on the workers, and that's often unforeseen from a first glance. So we took great intricacies to try and figure out what these organisational pressures were, which then took us to the next step, the tippy top tier of the wedding cake, which were the external factors, which include government and regulatory bodies, and how even they have an impact on this accident happening, which is wild that it has this whole knock-on effect down the whole chain.
I really like the wedding cake analogy. I think that one might stick. Nicely done there. How did the tool change the way that you understood what happened compared with just reading the accident report?
Well, an accident report isn't relating cause and effect. So an accident report will just tell you all the facts of the case. But what the AcciMap does for us is it shows us each element individually, but also connected. So we're seeing why this event happened and why the next event happened.
So it links things together.
Yeah,
Looks at how they interact.
As Carlo has said before, human factors is all about connection. So using an AcciMap was really beneficial to see how each factor connects to each other to create, I guess, again, a domino effect, as Eden said, as to how this can create such an awful, unforeseen accident.
I mean, I'd like to add on and say that in aviation, we're balancing a whole different set of factors in our operations. So any little thing that we tweak in one area can really impact another one. And that's unforeseen, probably 90% of the time. For example, utilizing different forklift operations for removing the engine from the pylon, for example, that was completely changed within a course of a few weeks, just because some managerial position up high said we need to save about 200 hours in maintenance per month or per week. So it really just shows how substantial it is when you look at it.
So I want to go a bit broader now. We've been talking about broadening out our understanding of incidents. I wondered if you might reflect on looking at this method beyond this particular incident and how you might think about systems thinking more broadly, both within aviation and outside of aviation. Where else do you think this kind of analysis applies?
I think the healthcare system is another good place this tool, this analysis could be used, because as we all know, there are organisational pressures which I think can be seen a bit more clearly than aviation sometimes. We know there are funding cuts and understaffing, and that is known. So that the model can help us see that and go further to external factors and actually, grasp these concepts. So healthcare is one, I would say.
And thinking as well, even just down to interpersonal relations, in our day-to-day lives, we tend to make assumptions just from face value or what we see in, for example, what a person does that we may not perceive positively. Instead, it's better to remove those assumptions and actually truly understand what is the root cause of a certain behavior. And that's also very important in the human factors, even just looking at operational, the context there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we all of us here want to go into some sort of piloting in some sense, and we think about the concept of CRM, crew resource management, and building on Yasmina's point, those interpersonal relationships where we understand what's going on behind the scenes and we understand what our work is and what other people are going through.
So one of the things that we talked about in the course is always the need to evaluate. Human factors people are always measuring and evaluating. Recording live podcasts is a bit of a new development this year in the course. So I wanted to ask you what you thought of this as a format and how it compared to other kinds of assessments that you've been familiar with.
I don't think we've ever done a podcast before in our university assignments. So it has been a new format that we decided to learn, not only just to tick the boxes, but to actually get as much out of this as we could and interact with a new modality in a different way from before. I personally have experience in one of my high school subjects. We sat down every week for a term and we listened to a true crime podcast about something that happened in America. So that gave me quite a good grasp of what podcasts sound like, what content there is, how people volley questions back and forth. And I think that brings it back to a point that not many people in their, university life at the moment have listened to a podcast before. So I think that was also a challenge for some people because, we usually go for essays or reports. And again, we're probably not reading essays and reports at home often. I mean, we do actually for aviation, but we're not reading written ones for assessments. We're just writing them ourselves. So by doing a podcast, it was a different way that we had to, twist our brains and do something different.
That's good. And in the podcast format, that allows us the opportunity to humanize our content. We really engage with it on an empathetic perspective. And in that case, even according to psychology, when we do that with a piece of information, we actually integrate it and we really value it a lot more, and we can remember it, recall it quite well, like as we can see today.
And I think personally, from my experience as a nervous speaker and anxious for public speaking type opportunities, this was a really unique one because it was just really a conversation between your fellow peers, and it was just bouncing off each other's ideas, telling jokes, but also learning and engaging with the content. And some groups had so many different styles of doing this that they engaged with each other. And it was a really interesting to see people's interpretation of this assessment.
I think this assignment really let our creativity run wild. So we were able to create a podcast name. We were able to think of future episode topics. But I really think that the most important thing for me was when you remove the sense of sight, being able to grasp the skill of explaining things to the same extent, purely just by explaining it by voice, just to our listeners, to be able to explain the same type of AcciMap diagram purely by explaining it by sound.
That's a really interesting point that you made, Kiralee, that by having to focus on one modality, it means you have to engage with the material a little deeper in order to explain it in only one way. I've not thought of it like that before. I guess when I was planning this, I sort of thought that, well, part of the reason was that I've seen lots of students do presentations, lots of them, where it's very much about just reading off a page or increasingly now a tablet. And even when they're in a group and they've worked on that as a group, they each sort of take it in turns serially to read their bit, and then the next person reads their bit, and then the next person reads their bit. And what I wanted to give an opportunity for was for you all to talk to one another and have interaction and conversation, because that actually mimics more of what you're going to have to do in the workplace. You're going to have to talk to people and explain things normally without that level of formality. So I'm really glad to hear that feedback. What would you rate it out of 5? 5 stars. You're in front of your former lecturer here, so it's probably a bit of a biased scenario, but how would you rate it?
I'd say 4.5 because of the aspect of speaking in front of your peers. And again, that is a common type of assessment, is to speak in front of your whole class. But also what we did throughout the term, which I found very helpful, was we did mini podcasts every week where we, 4 or so of us got up in front of the class with Carlo and we would be thrown a question and we'd research that topic for the past half an hour or so, and we'd formed diagrams on the screen, and it was very, very interactive. But then for the people who didn't want to go and sit at the front, which is also very understandable because it is scary sometimes, I think that can be a drawback. And then having the podcast of sitting in front of everyone with microphones in your face, which also isn't very usual for us, that can add a bit of a fear factor for it. But it was very, very interactive, and it was, nice for it to follow a normal kind of conversation that we would have when we're discussing an accident anyway, because we all get very passionate about it and we do bounce off each other. So it was great to actually formally verbalize it, and we did write it down, but it was very good to actually recognize that, and have it physical with us as well.
Yeah, and I'd actually rate it 5 stars. And I'd actually like to thank Carlo personally, because it really put me out of my comfort zone, even beyond the podcast, but our group huddles and speaking to the classroom, that it just, how do I word this? It's just so nice to have that experience of talking to your peers, and it's just a conversation. It's nothing like, you're not going to get attacked. It's not an essay. It's not critical of you. It's just a conversation with your peers and learning off each other.
And you don't have to focus on the extremely technical words, such as it's critically important to, we just go for it and just speak what happened. And that in itself is enough, which is great because that's what it is in the real world.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not even joking. I'd rate it 6 stars out of 5.
We're going up.
I mean, if it was possible to do that, then yes, obviously, I'd go for 6 stars out of 5. I mean, it just allows us to go above and beyond interacting with our content. I mean, we have done assignment formats such as even a panel before in some of our other human factors subjects, but I felt that this one was it really stuck with us. And not just me, I can speak for the rest of us. We were able to really engage with the content. We had a great team synergy. We practiced thoroughly in class, as Eden mentioned, and just being able to really look at the content and, present it in a podcast style, add those sound effects, have fun with it, humanize it. That was a great part about learning 3011.
Kirli?
I think I would also say 5 stars, not because I'm trying to get any extra credit, but I just think it's quite important for us to bring our brains together and form, again, it was slightly informal, but I think that this type of assignment was very important. We were all able to focus on our own areas of knowledge where we best fit into this type of conversation. I think that was really important. It kind of took the stress out of this type of assignment where you can bring 4 people's brains together and make jokes and capture the class, again, at Carlo's expense. But I really enjoyed this assignment. I think it would be my favourite of the term.
And it sticks with us and we remember what happened and we remember the type of discussion we had. And I think that will absolutely lead into our careers as well. So, thank you, Carlo.
Awesome. Thank you. Finally, then, thinking about the course and the project more broadly, what's the big thing that you'll sort of take away about human factors that you didn't sort of get before?
I mean, as I said before, but I'll just summarise it. The external and organisational factors and how much of an impact that has on the individual. Because we all go around thinking we're individuals, which we are, but we're much more of a conformed society than we would like to think. And this course really, emphasise that.
So you want to take away, Yasmina?
Thank you, Carla. Just another one is just how dense the world of human factors is and how much we actually interact with it. I mean, as people, of course, a lot of the time we're studying other people, other events, other things in the environment around us, when actually it applies to us more than all these other things, because from our day-to-day life, there's a lot of human factors perspectives you can take in what you do, and not just in the workplace. I mean, I can give an anecdote from today. I was cutting some Swiss cheese to toast it for breakfast, and I was just thinking about all the different ways I could relate this to an accident we've studied in class, and I actually thought about the podcast as well.
Zeke?
I think looking at when we take our learnings home and we talk to our parents about this, I think it's really interesting to appreciate how much we don't know about human factors and how much there is to learn, because every time I take a piece of information home about AcciMaps or the design of cockpits, my parents are like, oh, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it, and I had never considered that before. So it's good to know that the general public and people around us are also interested in that the education is very important to us.
Similar to Zeke, I took this accident home to my parents. I've actually spoken about it before to my family because, unfortunately, I am an aviation nerd. And they remembered that an engine had flown off the left wing, but they're like, the stall that the pilots couldn't recover from. And I was like, oh, you're so close to the point, but that's not even 10% of what truly happened. So I think that this assignment was really, really important. Again, just to zoom out, to take a wider look at every possible element so that you aren't pushed down a tunnel towards faulting the pilots each time that there's an accident, to really appreciate how important it is to look at all the 4 stages, for example, of an AcciMap.
And we really got to understand, and to an extent defend ourselves maybe. And that is the relevance right there in that case.
Mm. So picking up on something you just said there, one of the things that human factors people will often ask each other is, how do you explain what you do? So as I thought I might put that question to you just to put you on the spot a little bit. But as, budding human factors professionals, when you go home to your family, parents, friends, and they say, what have you been studying? And you say human factors. Do they know what you mean? And how do you explain it?
I'd say they maybe have heard the words. Maybe. But the way I explain it is I go, it's human factors is focusing and studying how a human interacts with the world around and with other humans. So we're trying to figure out why they do what they do and how we can actually adjust the world around them to make it easier or make it more accessible or remove limitations so that we can do something to the maximum capacity we can.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on that one? Doesn't have to be, but...
I do remember we were learning in class at some point, I believe it was in 3011, that there is a distinguishment between the human factor and human factors as an entire subject. And a lot of people resort to the former just because, it's the human factor. The human factor is a pilot and, people ascribe a lot of the blame to the pilot, as we mentioned before. So just distinguishing between the two and actually being able to explain that and seeing that we are interacting, we are a relationship between the human and the machine, and it's not just on the human himself. That's really important in our daily life.
So I've been asking all the questions. Maybe it's time to flip that and see if you have any questions you want to ask.
Why did you decide to make us do this?
Well, you all just said it was great. But why did I decide to make you do this? Why did we do podcasts? I had observed lots of students doing presentations over the years and standing up and doing their bit of their group presentation without really engaging in the material and being sort of caught in being more formal about what they're saying and being concerned about getting it right, not saying the wrong thing. And I wanted to loosen that up a bit and give students an opportunity to just talk conversationally and interact with one another in a way that sort of more closely parallels what they might do when they actually end up working. So that was really the idea. Plus I like podcasts, and we had some really cool tech to play with, some cool microphones, a podcasting deck. So it was always going to be fun, yeah? So, yeah.
Is there any way you want to build upon this assignment?
I don't know. I think we'll try it again. Encouraging students to try some different incidents and scenarios and to be a bit more creative. Maybe we'll do a bit more practice with podcasts in the beginning. Maybe I'll find some really good podcasts and tell people to listen to them throughout the course. Maybe we'll put some podcasts in as readings. Might help. So there's a good question there, because we're always looking for ways to change, support, expand, develop. So I think that's some of the things that we do here.
Another question for you, Carlo.
Yeah.
What is a quality in a student that when you interact with them, it makes you think that they would be a good human factors thinker or prospect?
Good question. I don't think it really differs from any other discipline. It's just about a level of engagement that you see that someone has. Students across all disciplines have this, where they're just really engaged with a particular topic or idea, and they've connected something themselves already that sort of sparked an idea for them. And they may not have all of it, but none of us have got all of it, right? But they've started something, and you can see there's a spark, and you want to help them explore that more.
I think one last question I have is, I'm going to flip one of your questions on to you.
Sure.
What is the biggest thing you've learned about human factors that you never really appreciated?
That's a good one too. I think, having worked in human factors for a while and working across different domains, the thing I like most about human factors is that it goes across domains, actually, that you can take it and you can use it almost anywhere. And all the people that I've looked up to across my career in human factors, they've all been people who've done a little bit of work in this domain and then shifted it to that domain and then shifted to another domain because they were just interested in everything. And I think that's kind of fun. But for me, it's always been about the reason that they're able to do that is because everything ultimately connects. They're people who see connections between domains. There's differences, yes, but there's also connections, and that's exciting that you can take what you do in one domain. You're not limited by that. You're elevated because of that, and you can take it somewhere else and apply it. So that's what I find exciting about it. Yeah.
I think we find that exciting too.
Yeah, definitely.
I've actually come up with one more question.
Oh, okay.
For you, but sorry, it's
all right.
the last one. But where do you think human factors will go from here? What's the future? And do you think there are some things that students need to learn more about in human factors?
I don't have a crystal ball. I don't really know.
That was a big question to ask you.
It's a very big question. I think one of the things that human factors is struggling with, that every discipline is struggling with, is AI. Because our discipline is so connected to the human, what's the role of the human in the system is a fundamental question asked by AI. And so that's really the big question that human factors is going to have to deal with soon. I don't think that means Armageddon, though, right? It means humans adapting to changes in socio-technical systems. AI is a change in a socio-technical system. We adapt to that, and there's opportunities in it, there's problems in it, and we'll adapt.
When someone asks you about your job and what you do, how do you explain human factors?
Another one that human factors people always ask each other. You say something like, what do you do? Oh, I work at a university. Oh, what discipline? Oh, I work in human factors and safety. And they're like, oh, what does that mean? And so then my response is usually something like, well, human factors is about how we put humans at the center of the system, and we want to design the parts of the system to accommodate their needs, abilities, and limitations. At which point people sort of go, oh, interesting. Some people will engage more and want to know what you mean by systems. And that's when you start having a really good conversation, because you're then giving examples of the kinds of systems that we're interested in, which might be aviation systems, it might be rail systems, it might be health systems, it might be technology, and a whole range of things that lead from there.
I think it's a good point that we're not trying to change the human, because we know that's a big, big thing. We're just trying to change the environment around them so that it works better for humans.
But of course, sometimes we can change humans and their behaviour by changing the environment around them.
Layers.
There's layers. So thanks everyone for sharing your analysis with us. I think it's really good to have an insight into what and how students in human factors and ergonomics are learning. And I also think it's great for students to have a sense of how what they're learning is interesting and important for people who are already in the industry too. Thanks everyone for your time today and for coming and sharing that with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much, Carlo.
Thanks for joining us at the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub, brought to you by the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia, where human-centred design really matters. If you like this podcast, make us your favourite in your podcast app. We look forward to chatting with you next time.